My name is David Brooks. I write for the Concord Monitor, the Granite Geek column, and I've been moderating Science Cafes for 7 years now. This is our 7th anniversary. I was down in Nashua last week for theirs, and we are getting close to our 100th. I'm not quite sure. We've sort of lost count. That's, keeping count is kind of scientific. We don't do that very well. But anyway, so how many of you have never been to a Science Cafe before? Whoa, excellent. All right, good. All right, well, here's how it works. So, well, actually, let me give you a quick history. So this was started by a couple of science fans. Neither of them is here tonight. Sarah Eck over in Hanover, and Dan Marchek is a computer guy down in Brookline. Basically, they knew science cafes existed around the world, around the country, and they thought it'd be a good thing to have in New Hampshire. They kind of ran into each other, and they started it, and they invited me to help out. I was actually working down in Nashua at the Telegraph at the time. And I thought it was a cool idea, wonderful, just the thing my wife and I were looking to do in the evenings. Now the kids were grown. And I thought it would last 6 months and fizzle out. And so I'm not very good at predictive prowess there. But and it's been going on ever since. We choose a topic, trying to think of something that has some relevance to New Hampshire, and then we try and find panelists who will come and speak knowledgeably about it and not charge us any money. And there are other science cafes, and you'll see them particularly down in Boston or on the universities, where they have the equivalent of a science cafe, which is generally a professor comes and talks about their research, which is also cool, but kind of a different thing. We have, as I said, we actually started in Concord, went down to Nashua because I was there, and then when I came to the Concord Monitor almost 3 years ago, we expanded, opened here, and we still have it in Nashua. And since then, there is one that is operating now in Portsmouth at, I forget the name of one of the breweries. And another one has, and one is operating in Manchester. Sea Science Center does one, right downtown. So, and for a while there was one in Hanover as well. And so I've long maintained that New Hampshire has the highest per capita rate of science cafes in the country. And I think that's a pretty safe statement, actually. So the way it works is I will ask these folks, fine gentlemen, to introduce themselves. I will ask the first question. After that, it's your questions. We don't really have any prepared presentations or anything. And so if you don't ask anything, it's really boring. So have questions. Pretty much any question. The only rule we have one rule in 2 parts. There's no PowerPoint and there's no politics. So, but otherwise, anything's fair game. Next month's Science Cafe here in Concord is actually not set. It fell through, so I'm not sure what the topic's going to be yet. We have, if you have not signed up, there is a sign-up sheet as you're walking out the door on the little table by the door, so you can get on the email address list, and we'll let you know what's going on. ConcordTV, the local cable access channel, films this, so if you're in the witness identification program, this isn't good for you, but and they put it online, so you'll be able to watch this one in a week or two when they've got it edited, and you can also go see some old ones, and they get watched by other cable access TV stations around the country. I've been told that Utah, for some reason, really likes these. So if you're and New Jersey, awesome. So if you're walking down the street in Salt Lake City, people might know who you are. The other thing is, this, as you've already noticed, it's a little crowded in here. This is a difficult venue for the wait staff because we all come at the same time, we all leave at the same time. So tip generously. As I say, it's Science Cafe, so you can calculate very high percentages in your head. And I think that's it. ScienceCafeNH is .org is our website if you want to keep track of it, and as I say, sign up as you're leaving for the email address. So let's go into the actual panel itself. So what I'm going to do is give these fine gentlemen, as I said, they got a microphone. Each one of them can have like 3 minutes to tell us who they are and why we should pay any attention to them, and then I will ask the first question, and then it's on to you. So go ahead, Richard. There you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Nork. I am with the Solid Waste Management Bureau at New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And I have some experience in recycling, so you should listen to me. Before starting at DES, I was actually an employee of this gentleman. at the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. So I'll let him talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Mike also, so we've got two mics, no waiting. I'm proud to serve as the executive director for the oldest recycling collaborative in the country. That's the Northeast Resource Recovery Association.
You might want to move your mic down just a bit.
It was founded, I probably don't need it. It was founded in 1981, and we're celebrating our 37th anniversary next Monday and Tuesday in Manchester, and where we put on probably one of the best regional recycling conferences. And we're going to pass out a little flyer so you can have it later if you decide you want to come visit. Been with the organization about 10 years. Was very proud to have folks of Mike's caliber and some other folks that have worked with us and have gone on to do even bigger and better things in the recycling industry. And this is a great time to be in recycling. You're going to hear a lot of other things, but the theme for our conference this year, which we picked out last September, was recycling rules. And if you do it right and you do it by the rules, you're going to find out that it's worth doing.
Good evening. My name isn't Mike. I'm Richard Lee, Public Works Director for the town of New London. I worked for the town of New London for 45 and a half years. I've been a supervisor for the last 30. We market most of our recyclables through NRA for the last 31 years. They've been in business. So I've been up and down the ladder for numerous times with all the recyclables and products and how to get rid of them or whatever. So.
Excellent. All right, well, I will start, as I said, with the first question, and I have sort of a general one, which is, I'll start with you, and tell us what is the hardest material to recycle and why?
Well, it depends on what day it is. Right now, the most difficult commodity, and we look at them as commodities just as you would on the Dow Jones, if you would, but the most difficult one right now is mixed paper. A year ago, mixed paper was paying $80 to $100 a ton. Bale it up, ship it out, sell it, you get $80 to $100 a ton. Right now, if you try and sell mixed paper, your first response is, we don't want any more. And the second response is, okay, if you twist my arm, I'll take it, but it's going to cost you $65 a ton. And there are many other commodities that are difficult to recycle, but the one you're going to see in the headlines that's causing most of the economic damage right now is the mixed paper. And that gets you over to why mixed paper. It's the majority of the single stream plant by weight. Of the tonnage of material, it all goes into one bin. When everything's in the one bin, when you get through pulling out trash that people have put in because they think it can be recycled, and you pull out other things that you can't really recycle in the single stream plants, you're pretty much left with mixed paper, some plastic, and cardboard. But by weight, mixed paper is the majority of it. And most of the single stream plants in the United States, certainly the ones that have been built in the last 6 years, there was an explosion of about 150 new plants came online in the last 6 years, but they were all built based on the economics of 2011, when mixed paper was up at 100, but cardboard was at 200. That's not the case anymore. And what's really created the industry is the fact that China will no longer take that material. They've made a decision, a political decision and an economic one, that they're not going to take our material anymore if it's contaminated. And contaminated can be all kinds of things, but one of the things that gets contaminated real easy is mixed paper, because it's the majority of the stuff floating through there. It gets mixed in with the plastic, it gets mixed in with the glass, I'm sure we'll talk about glass. It gets mixed in with the aluminum cans for those that are from a non-bottled state, and basically you have a mess when you're done. I think Marilyn in our office likes to say, you can't undo an omelet, especially if it's a Western omelet and you're only looking for the red peppers. It's really hard to get those out of there so you can ship non-contaminated material. And I'll end with the fact that China last year made a list of 24 items it was no longer going to take, not just from the United States, but from the entire rest of the globe. And mixed paper was certainly one of them. But they just put a complete quarantine on anything from the United States, and it's not going to be coming off until June 4th. Most of the mixed paper in the United States that went through single-stream plants was going to China. So now it's not going there. They've got to reroute the ships to either Thailand or South Vietnam or to India, and they haven't got the capacity to take it, and they don't want contaminated material either. So we're really faced with the challenge, but the real one is the economic one. I read this morning there's a county, I think Sacramento County in California, last year they were getting paid for their recyclables over $1 million for the year. This year they're having to pay that same $1 million back to the company. And you think about municipal budgets, that just goes crazy. Mixed paper is hard to recycle, sorry.
Anybody want to add anything, or is that? No?
So,
I would go along with what Mike says. For us, right now, it's getting to a point where we look at our tipping fee for the landfill for our solid waste and trucking to get it there, and right now, the paper is almost at a break-even cost for us. If it goes up any more to get rid of it, then we're going to have to look at, do we just throw it into the trash, or do we continue to send it out and pay to get rid of it, instead of, it's right on that verge right now. So it's a tough time for paper right now.
it looks like we have a question, but
You want to add anything?
not on the paper. I wanted to talk about a different item that's difficult to recycle.
A different item is difficult to recycle, is
Okay.
fine.
So Mike mentioned that paper right now is very difficult to recycle, and that's kind of that's a market-driven issue that's come up recently. Long-standing, however, has been the issue of plastics recycling. And, you know, with single stream, we're able to throw everything in the same bin, and that kind of creates a disconnection between the person who has the item and needs to discard it and the ability to know what actually is recyclable and not, because you're just throwing everything in the same bin. So plastics recycling has been a problem. If it's not a 1 or a 2 or a 5, pretty much it's not recyclable. And most of that has been shipped over to China. So what's been common is the industry has been separating out number 1s and number 2s, and everything else gets bailed up. It's called a 3 through 7 mix, because the plastics numbering system is a 1 through 7 numbering system.
Can you hold the mic up?
Yeah, sorry.
Down over here.
Okay. So the 3 through 7s have been particularly difficult to recycle for a long time, and that's because they don't have the plastic. The number system indicates the resin that's used for the plastic, and 3 through 7s are pretty much, you know, they're not consistent in the types of plastics, the resins that are used. There may be additives that are used. They may not have the same viscosity. That's kind of an issue in the plastics industry. The plastic needs to have a certain viscosity to melt down at a certain rate so it can be recycled. And so that's been an issue. And like I said, 3 through 7s have been shipped over to China primarily. And now that China has said of the 24 materials that they don't want to take anymore, most of those are plastics. So now we don't have an outlet for those materials as well.
All right, we have a question here up front.
Thank you for coming and spending your evening with us and giving us a bit of your knowledge. We were down in Florida, and some of the cities no longer allow certain straws to be used. They have forbidden the sale of them within the city. And it got me wondering about the nibbles. How do you go about taking the nibble and recycling it? What is that, a heat process? Is it a chemical process?
So
Just a warning, our audience is filled with retired engineers, so be careful.
I'm not an engineer.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Please went on TV.
So what would happen typically is a plastics recycling facility would grind up the material and turn it into what they do is they actually turn it into a nibble from, it's a heat process, and then that is used, it's like the nibble itself can be used as a feedstock for making other products. And what I talked about before with viscosity, that's where the viscosity comes into play, because it needs to melt at a certain rate. And it needs to be so that it melts evenly and uniformly. So as long as you have nibbles that are all the same resin and have the same viscosity, then you can make your bottle or your jug or whatever whatever plastic container that you may have in mind. Typically, bottles, like number one PET, like drinking water bottle, like a like a single-use water bottle. Those are blow molded, so they melt the nurbles down. Thank you, David, for the vocab word. We couldn't remember before the session what they were called, and they blow air into it, and it actually blows the plastic into a mold. Others are injection molded, like an HDPE milk jug are injection molded, and that's why you see like the little ribs on the bottom. Yeah. So.
All right. You got a question out back? I got one here in the middle. Who can get to him? Okay. I got it.
Thank you, gentlemen. It sounds like single stream is one of the prime culprits here. Should we be going back to sorting our recycling like they still do in New London? Well, that's a really good question. I was asked a couple of weeks ago, is single stream dead? It may not be dead, but it's certainly on life support in terms of how we're going to fix this. Again, for the larger communities that save a lot of money by having just 2 pickups on the side of the road, it's hard to overcome that piece. Once the markets come back, then it'll take some of the pressure off. Long term, we need to figure out, and this goes back to the single straw, we need to figure out how not to make this stuff in the first place, because whether it's single stream or it's source separated at a transfer station, it's still going to be a problem if we can't keep it out of the waste stream. We market materials for about 400 municipal members across New England, and when it comes down to the purity of the commodity, when we're selling New London's material, we're marketing that just like an organic banana. It's worth 5 cents more for that banana. You believe it's worth more, and so do the domestic mills. We deal with a lot of mills that won't accept anything from a single stream plant, regardless of how well they slow down the line or add more people or that type of thing. But I'm very encouraged, and it's kind of a half full glass here, with the single-use straw, because we're actually giving an award on Tuesday. We couldn't quite make it to the wedding, but we're actually recognizing Queen Elizabeth because she banned all plastics from the royal houses. Apparently, she's bringing out the good china. So it's just examples like that. The other award that we're giving to a gal from Britain is a 12-year-old student, and we saw some younger people came in earlier. The students are really the ones that get it real quick. They know that we can't survive if we have more fish or less fish in the ocean than plastic by 2050.
Which we will at the rate we're going.
At the rate we're going, we basically back up a garbage truck full of plastic every minute and dump it in the ocean. I thought we had 1 gyre north of Hawaii. We now have 2 that are both the size of Texas. And it's not just Hawaii. There's about 7 of these floating around. And I think you mentioned earlier today, this bag floating around at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. And that's just symbolic. That's the canary in the coal mine. We've got to start paying attention and fix this. Don't make materials that we have to throw away. Don't make materials that can't be reused, because the hierarchy really is reuse first, or reduce it first, then reuse it, and then recycle it. We're the last line of defense here.
All right.
If I may just add a comment on that, Dave. The question about is single stream really the problem, and I think to some degree it invites a Pandora's box because of that disconnection between the consumer and knowledge of what is and what isn't recyclable, because you're throwing everything in the same bin. And there's also this issue of wishful recycling, where, especially in towns like Concord, where you have pay as you throw, so you have to pay for every bag of trash you create. So you're looking for every opportunity you can to divert stuff into the recycling. And if it's made of plastic, you ask yourself, well, maybe it's recyclable, I don't know, but somebody else will figure it out down the line. So you throw it in there. The problem is that kind of mentality, and that, I guess the root issue is education. And really, it's going to be a concerted effort among, municipalities and also waste handling companies to really get the word out about what is and isn't recyclable and be consistent about that. The other problem is that single stream was invented at a time when we were recycling the stuff that we used to recycle 20 years ago. You know, cans, bottles, cardboard, paper, glass bottles and jars. Now the industry, the packaging industry has expanded into all new types of packaging. And so the lines have blurred. It's a little bit grayer about whether something is or isn't recyclable, because the packaging industry is advancing so much faster than the infrastructure that was set up to handle it can adapt. So that's another part of it. So I think it's education. I think it's also the industry itself needs to kind of, you know, get the meeting of the minds, so to speak, and get everyone together and say, all right, we need to be consistent about what kind of packaging we're using and make sure that it is recyclable at the end of the day.
Did you want to, somebody else want to comment on that, or?
She's got a question.
Yeah, I got a question.
So, am I better off to buy my mustard in a glass jar or a plastic jar? I mean, every time I turn around, it's like, oh, there's more plastic. Oh, what can I do? You know, and so now I buy like my dishwater detergent. My husband and I are always battling this. He's a terrible recycler. Oh, wait, this is like the bone of contention with him. Yeah, well, good. He'll hear me. Fred, you hear me? So he'll buy that plastic jug.
We charge more for
Cascade.
marriage counseling.
Yeah. He buys a plastic jug of Cascade, and I buy the cardboard box. I was using borax. He's like, oh, the glasses are foggy. Well, get over it. You know, I don't know. I just, like, I can live with the foggy glass. I want the environment clean. So, again, I don't want to take up the whole, so should I buy a glass jar of mustard or a plastic jar of mustard? Because I look at those poor animals that are suffocating and they're strangled up in plastic, and also like the how it's made. What's worse? What is the lesser of the evil?
But the glass weighs more, and so the truck delivering it used more gasoline, so, I'm sorry.
So David's diving deep into the carbon footprint. I would say, just my gut. I should get a little handle that I can just put right here. I would say the plastic, as long as it's a 1 or a 2, would probably be the better choice.
It's a 1 or a 2.
Even though the process of making that plastic is so crappy too, I mean.
Well, because 1s and 2s are easily recyclable. And glass is theoretically recyclable, but the problem is that the market for glass hasn't been there. And it's partly, you can blame beer to some degree, because the beer industry has been getting away from glass for the exact reason that David mentioned, that it's a heavy packaging material. So if you're shipping your product, you don't want to have to pay or take up space to ship the packaging. You want to ship it in the lightest container possible. And especially with the craft industry in recent years has been exploding, and they're all using aluminum cans for their distribution. Oh, aluminum is definitely, aluminum is like,
That's a problem.
aluminum is by far, it's like the standard bearer for recyclability.